I'm walking down the
I do want to say to Doni and many of you in this room that over a very long career in this city, all of you have helped me and my colleagues tell the truth and to try to tell.
I may not look like you and you me, but
my head up.
I'm South Carolina, so I just
Got it.
What does this event mean to you, Miss Peggy Mars?
Oh, my heart,
Happy 20th anniversary.
my heart is about loving up on my sisters. Do you know what it feels like to have your sisters in the room? Done.
and dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. I am beautiful, I am blessed, but not just what you see in the flesh. I'm free from people, free from myself. There's
The doctor lived next door to the janitor to the reverend and the lawyer. We were together. Now we get so high and mighty that you create stress for your society because you don't like poor black folks either. That's a health problem. Get yourself together so I can stop being taking care of geriatric people and get back to pediatrics. I thank you, Doni, for all you've done. Let's keep doing it all the more.
letting His glory shine through. Dare to be you, dare to be me, dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. And I dare you, I dare you, I dare you to be you.
First name's Doni, last name's Glover. In it to win it for the long haul, baby. Many of you out there who have been watching this show for a while know that my dad was a funeral director, Donald Edward Glover, and he had some very special colleagues. One was Joseph H. Brown, the daddy. We have with us today another UK, that's what we call Undertaker's kids, but he is also a funeral director and mortician himself. He is the one and only, and my friend. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm well. Good morning, Doni Glover. It's a pleasure to see you. Always a pleasure to see you. When we talk, it's always about something exciting, and oftentimes it's about something that has to do with death care.
Yes, sir.
And modern death care. Doni mentioned that we are both UKs. We are both Undertaker kids. And we grew up here in Baltimore. We are steeped deep in the industry. And we have a lot to discuss. And it's been a while since we've talked.
Yeah, I remember we were doing a television show over on, I believe, one of the channel 45 or 54, something like that. And you were one of our guests. We only ran 6 episodes. It was quite a production. I learned so much, but you were right there, and one of our very fine sponsors. So it's great to have you back. Let's start with this. How was it growing up as an Undertaker's kid from your perspective?
Well, probably the same as yours. You know, practically born in a funeral home, born going to church for funerals and being in the prep room and going to folks' homes. And back in the day, we would go to folks' home and sit at their table and make arrangements right there at the table. We don't do that anymore. There's a lot of things that we don't do anymore. When we look back at the history of undertaking, we look at the fact that our buildings, our facilities are called funeral homes. Funeral homes because we lived in the homes. We lived upstairs. We spent our childhood years going in and out of the funeral home. I remember walking into the funeral home and the deceased would be on the right, and you take 2 steps up into the kitchen and get something to eat. You know, we didn't even have hours. People visited the funeral home all hours and what have you, because it was just a few businesses in the community. Funeral homes, churches, barbershops, beauty shops. Not too many opportunities. A lot of other communities had other opportunities of merchandising and what have you. But undertaking is one of the things that Donnie and I, have been steeped in from birth.
So your dad, my dad, I think it was Vernon Bailey, and I believe it was Leroy Dott. They called them the Four Horsemen. What was that all about, Joy? What did you think when you heard about that?
Well, back in the day, and I'm not talking about too long ago, undertakers came together daily. It used to be a culture that when you finished work, you gathered together, you went to a bar, you set up the bar, you drank and you talked, you had this camaraderie. I'm sad to say that we don't have that much. We're so competitive nowadays. I don't think we have that camaraderie except when there's a convention or something like that. But we spent our time together when we were growing up, and our parents spent a lot more time together than you and I do today. So I think that is a huge difference between the way the industry is now and the way the industry was then. And the history of undertaking, I use that word and I use it fondly because that's the word that I grew up with and Donnie grew up with too. I use that fondly. The history of the undertaking in the Black community is especially rich and deep with ritualization and ceremonies and the way we do things. So go ahead, Donnie.
So much history comes back to mind, and I hope this is not too harsh for non-undertaker people, but we grew up. It was nothing to have my dad wake me up out of my sleep, say, "Come on, boy, we gotta go pick up a body."
That's right.
And it be at somebody's house, it could be at the hospital, or it could be at the medical examiners. And so, before I was 5 or 6, I had seen more dead bodies than most people had seen in a lifetime. And we did live upstairs, Patterson Park in Lanville, late 60s. And then 712, 714 East North Avenue. We lived above it. That was an even bigger funeral home. It wasn't until I was 9 that we came back to West Baltimore, and I lived in a regular house. It was an experience, to say the least. Only one nightmare. It had nothing to do per se with the morgue, but only one nightmare I recall as a kid. Because our parents, my dad, he would not allow me to be afraid. He said, "Boy, it ain't the dead ones that hurt you.
Come on.
It's the live ones."
That's right. That's right. So we're here to talk about today something that is very, I don't want to say very controversial. Is it all right if I jump into it?
Well, can you give me just a little bit more of a second?
Sure.
It's a little bit of the history I wanted to touch on, just this one point. And you mentioned the camaraderie and how competitive it is now. And we know of how here in Baltimore, there's a certain tradition. You and I grew up in it. And it wasn't until I started learning about the topic of my second book about Black Wall Street that I realized we grew up on a Black Wall Street, if you will. You talked about our parents and how they came together on a regular basis. It was nothing for them to commune daily, for them to talk daily, for them to look out for each other, for them to help each other. We learned that we grew up seeing the beautician who came in and did the women's bodies. She was Black. The person who sold the caskets. I remember a Black man selling caskets. I remember the organist, the preacher, everyone, the drivers, the workers. It was Black Wall Street. I look around the corner there on Calhoun Street in the 1300 block, and I think of George G. Kelson.
Kelson.
And we had a Kelson Elementary School. the city of Baltimore found it wise to rename that school to Sandtown Winchester Academy, not understanding the history that was erased by taking that name off of the school. That block on Calhoun Street, as you know, many people benefited from that business. It hired people. We grew up seeing us supporting each other in every facet, all the way to Bonaparte the Floors up there in North of McCullough.
That's right.
Bonaparte,
Crips.
Yeah, Crips. Do you have any thoughts on growing up with a Black Wall Street mentality?
Well, I didn't really understand the Black Wall Street mentality when I was growing up, and I really did not really wrap my brain around it until you started talking about it. So I thank you for bringing that up. The fact of the matter is that our parents, they were business people. They were business people. They were supporters. They were major influences in the community. They fed people. They clothed people. They housed people. They gave people jobs and what have you. All these things that you say, and then afterwards, we did something. They did something that we don't necessarily do. They went to the bar, the community bar, and we can name a few of them. And I remember many, many times sitting at the bar as a little boy, drinking Donald Duck orange juice.
That was the little can.
Yeah, that's a little can. Donald Duck orange juice and Utz potato chips. So that was the sort of, and we sat, I'm sure that your dad sat you on the bar too, quite a few times.
Yes, sir.
You opened up that can of Donald Duck.
Barbecue potato chips.
Barbecue potato chips. Lovely.
I think over there in East Baltimore, they had a bowling thing that you slide the puck down in the bowl. You could bowl that way.
Let's see, the funeral home over in East Baltimore, that was Elroy Wilson. That's good. Well, it was a few in East Baltimore. The Loxes,
Joseph Locks wanted, if I'm not mistaken, the oldest Black family business in America at one juncture.
That's what I understand. Isn't that amazing? Right here in Baltimore.
Right here in Baltimore. That's what I'm saying. We grew up in Baltimore, a majority Black city, and a lot of our young people probably have no idea of the tradition out of which we were birthed. How we did stick together, how we did economically and viably have a cohesion, and not just here in Baltimore, but nationally. I remember Daddy going to the National Funeral Directors and Morticians Association convention. Yes. That was something he looked forward to every year. He was so proud to be a member. He eventually became president here in the state of Maryland.
That's right. Your dad would put me on the spot a lot of times at those gatherings and ask me to say something. I'm not a orator or speaker like you, but he would put me on the spot and I would just do my best. And I appreciated your dad for doing that.
I remember your dad always had a smile. He would come in and he would light up the room.
That was Dad, yes. So I'm a fourth generation mortician. My great grandfather, who started the business in the late 1800s, we have some documentations that might indicate that it was around 1896 or so, was a cabinet maker. So he was able to fashion what they called back then coffins. He also had livery. We say delivery nowadays. He had livery. He had buggies. He had horses. He was entrepreneurial. And ultimately, his home became the funeral home. And then it was passed down to his sons. And of course, there was always a woman there, my grandmother, Thelma. And she was there, and she was very, very important in the community, as a lot of women were, because, see, it was a male-dominated industry. But behind the male was always that strong woman in the community that supported us, that supported the community, and that helped us sustain businesses throughout the generations.
So
That
big ups to
probably
our
don't get
moms.
enough. Yeah.
Big
Yeah.
ups to our moms. They were the backbone. I know my mother smoothed out my father's rough edges.
There we go. There we
That,
go.
that silk touch that he just did not have. Before we get on, one last thing. You mentioned some names, and you know them much better than I, but just a shout out to some of those icons in the industry, from William C. March to Katie Williams, Miss Ringgold. I remember Miss Ringgold had the blue hair. Taking you back, huh?
Yeah, well, you also you mentioned Vernon Bailey. You mentioned George Kelson. You mentioned, we could go on. We could just name these influential people in the community that helped people get past the most difficult times in their life when they had a death occur. But it wasn't just that. The funeral directors, the undertakers in our community looked out for the community. We took care of the community. We fed the community. We clothed the community. We had events, and we cared not only just for the dead. We cared for the living. You have to care to be in this industry. If you don't care, you're not going to last long. So it'll just burn you out. You have to care.
I thank you for that. We grew up. Who knew? I mean, we were just little kids, but as you said, we were taking care of families in their toughest hour. To where at a young age we were caregivers.
Caregivers. What do they call it? They call us last caregivers now, especially after the COVID issue that we've come out of recently. A terrible thing, the COVID.
So that might be a great segue into alkaline hydrolysis.
Okay.
So let's first of all commend you for making history. You, Joey Brown, have led a 4-generation business into the future. And I am so proud of you. You are a history maker. Tell them what you did. You did something that no one has done. We didn't think about it. You thought of it. And not only did you think about it, you pioneered. Special thank you to Tyrone Tabor of STEM City USA, who hosts this show on his metaverse platform, 21st century, digital mentality, virtual and metaverse and all of that scientific stuff that's above my pay grade. But you have done something in the funeral industry that hasn't been done before, not here in the city of Baltimore. Tell them what you did.
Well, let me start by saying this. I was born in South Baltimore. I was born in a community they called Otterbein that has been gentrified, and the funeral home moved because our people moved. I have seen a lot of changes throughout the years, but one of the things that I remember is the HIV crisis epidemic of the late 80s, 90s. And that's when we started to see cremation. The Black community not in Baltimore, we didn't do cremation. If we did, it was kept on the down low. It was hush hush because people felt embarrassed by it because there was maybe no insurances or anything like that.
And it was a more affordable option.
It was a more affordable option. Now, as far as I am concerned, I can remember some histories where we could not go to other communities for death care. I wasn't mad about that. I think that we should care for our own dead. So when the community started choosing cremation, I did not like going to another community to care for our dead. We haven't done it historically. Other communities did not want to take care of our dead. So we care for our own dead. Mount Auburn Cemetery, Black Cemetery. I remember I was talking to, I can't remember her name. Anyway, I was talking about how much pride people had in that cemetery. Unfortunately, it's fallen into disrepair, as maybe a lot of cemeteries will, because the cremation rate is over 60% across the country.
60% of customers are choosing cremation?
That's correct. Mm-hmm. Wow. And it's predicted in the next few years it'll probably go up to 80%. Now, I went to Germany to study cremation back in the early 2000s, and they are at 100% cremation. All the graves in Germany were this big because everybody was cremated and typically buried in the cemetery. I visited a crematory outside of Berlin in a town called Treptow that had a municipal function crematory that did 47,000 cremations a year. Beautiful architecture. And that was one of the things that inspired me to bring cremation to Baltimore in a way that had not been seen before. Doni, we have a $2.1 million facility dedicated to those families that choose cremation. Our cremation is not in the back, it's not in the dark. Families know where, when, and how their loved one is being cremated. And that was very, very important to me. Instead of going to another community for the service for our people that we have historically taken care of ourselves. I did not want to go to another community for death care.
That's Black Wall Street. That's the Black Wall Street mentality, brother. Do all we can for ourselves.
That's right. And as being an undertaker, that was really important to me. I did not like going to a different community, driving and literally just turning over our dead to someone else who doesn't care. Just a job. I have nothing against, I'm not going to go there, but I have nothing against it, and that's what people choose. But I feel that it's very, very important that we take care of our own dead, and we continue to take care of our dead, even though caring for the dead has evolved a lot.
I'm sorry to jump in. I just think of how many times, my first job besides answering the phone, good evening, Glover's Funeral Chapel, besides working, in the office, my first job as I grew older was collections. Oh, help me somebody. They don't know what I'm Joey, they don't know what I'm about to say. Joey, how do you collect when the body's already in the ground? Joey, that was my job. Joey, I had no idea what Doc Glover was setting me up for. But I'm thinking of how many times our fathers, our mothers took care of people whose money was funny. How many times we looked out for people at a loss.
My dad used to say, if I had gotten paid for everything that I had done, I would have retired 20 years ago.
That part.
That part. Indeed.
But they did it. And honestly, Joey, I never, ever heard him say their money's funny, treat them differently. Never.
No.
They got the same service across the board. Everybody.
That's right.
Professional, caring, empathetic.
Family care, because we knew each other. We knew who lived next door. We knew who lived around the corner. We knew who lived over on the east side. Our fathers, they develop personal connections with the community, like you do, Donnie, like, like I do, with personal connections with the community and those people. Well, I'll tell you one thing about my father, and I knew that he loved people. He would remember people's names. He
Yes,
would pull people's names out of his socks. And the thing about it is if you love music, you know the words, you know the lyrics. If you love people, you know their names, you know who they are. Now he might have said, "Oh, you are Miss Mamie's uncle's cousin's niece's nephew." He may have said that, but he knew. And that was the glue that pulled the community together and made us tight. And so by saying that, by going outside of our community for something as sacred as death care, just didn't sit well with me when I started seeing cremation during the HIV epidemic.
also, it required the HIV epidemic. It required our fathers. It required, those involved in death care to get a retraining.
Yeah, there was a lot of fear associated with HIV, but I remember my dad said to me, he said, "Joey, how many HIV cases, how many HIV AIDS cases have you embalmed?" And I said, "Gee, Dad, I don't know." And he said, "Exactly." He said, "Let's get to work." He said, "Nothing's new. Nothing's new. We have to care for our dead." And we did very well, because we care for a lot. We did work for a lot of other funeral homes too, who were fearful of caring for the HIV casualties.
That's why I'm so proud of the tradition out of which we come. And that's why having you on this show is so special to me, Joey. I'm so proud of what you are doing now. Take us back to, so you right there, Pennsylvania, Fulton Ricestown, the tri-section.
Yes.
Everybody knows it. And you built a facility.
Yes. Yes.
$2.3 million facility.
$2.1 million facility that sits on 2.6 acres in the middle of Baltimore City. Yeah, I'm very proud, and I wish that Dad could see all this right now.
Does.
But
he does. He's smiling on you. Can we tell the story of what Charlene thought when you brought her the idea?
Sure, we can tell the story. She wasn't fond of it, and which is not unusual, because the funeral industry is slow to change, and cremation had a negative connotation. And so what Joseph Brown had to do was to bring cremation to the community in a way that was more positive. I mean, after all, at the end of the day, we say earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. So people have said terrible things to me when we started cremating 15 years ago. They said things like, "Oh no, well, we burn the trash, we bury our dead." I heard things like that. It was hurtful, but I still knew that there was a community, there was individuals who wanted cremation, and they saw cremation as a way to give their loved ones the ashes. That's going to get into a whole nother thing here. We're going to talk about the healing that comes along with taking one's ashes home with them. There's a story in the Bible about ashes being brought home to a family. Sometimes that's the only way that we can have closure from a loss, is to be able to embrace what represented the person during their life. And I think that with cremation, it allows people to develop some closure, because people are traveling all over. A lady told me once, she came up from, she was born in Baltimore, but she came from, she lived and worked in Atlanta, and she came here, and she says, "A cemetery in Baltimore means nothing to me, but having my mother's ashes with me means everything."
I got my brother's ashes. I had no idea at that funeral 3 years or so ago how important they would
Come
be
on.
in my life today. I had no
See?
idea back then. And so on that very note, if you started 15 years ago, I have to ask you, did it hit you like a ton of bricks when the COVID pandemic hit and death care had to change? Did it hit you like a ton of bricks that as confirmation?
Well, I came in one morning during the COVID epidemic and pandemic, and we had 60 cases. 60. Why did we have 60? Because we had the crematory. We had 60 cases. People just didn't know. They were afraid. We were wiping down doorknobs. Cremation seemed to be the way to go during the pandemic. We held funeral services outside on our ceremonial plaza, which is a space that is dedicated for those to commit their loved one's body, earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I can explain that also. It's a ceremony, a ritual that is on our plaza that allowed us to be outside and replicate the feeling of going to the cemetery to bid farewell. And so because of COVID and restrictions of capacity of individuals and masking and what have you, we were doing this outside, and it was wonderful to be able to provide death care to the community who was hurting so badly from all the death that they were experiencing from COVID-19. And I don't know the numbers, but I know that we got hit hard, really, really hard in Baltimore. We thought we had dodged it, but come around that March of 2020, we got hit hard, really hard. And so to piggyback on that, what I wanted to say is that once a family chooses cremation, they typically choose it over and over again. It sets the trend for that family. Now, there'll always be some exceptions, perhaps the military, where the grave will be at the Garrison Forest Cemetery or the Crownsville or Cheltenham or whatever veteran cemetery that there is. But we're cremating a lot of veterans. Cremation has become a choice, not necessarily a last ditch type of offering that people chose. Remember, I was telling you about burning the trash and burying the dead. Well, our objective was to elevate the experience that the family had with cremation, to elevate that experience. They see our building. They can see what it looks like on the inside. They can see the dignity that is associated with cremation. And most importantly, like I said before, they know where, when, and how their loved one is being cremated. And saying how their loved one is being cremated, we'll start talking about alkaline hydrolysis. Cremation has historically been done with flame, with fire. In fact, some countries have practically deforested their landscape with removing the timber for cremation. In India, the cremation is required by religion, and it takes a lot of lumber. We cremate at 1,650 degrees here in the state of Maryland. Those are high temperatures, and those are the sort of temperatures you can cremate as low maybe as 1,500, but those are the type of temperatures that it takes to cremate a human body. And what we're doing essentially is vaporizing the water content of the body, because we are made of water. This life is on this planet because of water. Evolutionists say that life came from the ocean. We are using fire, to vaporize the water. Human beings, I weigh about 200 pounds. I contain about 10 gallons of water, 10 and a half gallons of water, 68% water. So it kind of makes sense to go back physically to water. Because once you remove the water, there's very little left. Picture a grape, picture a raisin. A raisin is a grape with the water removed. So instead of using flame and high temperatures, what we're doing is that we are introducing water cremation. It's been called aquamation, but I understand that someone has a patent on that, so I hesitate to use that word as much, aquamation. But the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu made prearrangements for his body to be aquamated following his death. As you know, he was an enthusiast about the well-being of the planet and the environment. And so he chose for his body to be aquamated by alkaline hydrolysis for the benefit of the planet.
And we're talking about all the way in South Africa.
All the way in South Africa, alkaline hydrolysis. Now, it's a different system than the different technology that we're using here in Baltimore, but nevertheless, his body was aquamated. And I'm sure, without a doubt, that Archbishop Desmond Tutu would appreciate the way that we're going to be doing alkaline hydrolysis right here in Baltimore.
So tell me,
technology.
So you offer fire cremation, but now you offer aquamation.
Well, I have to be honest. The engineers, I love to walk back here with my iPad. The engineers are still working on our alkaline hydrolysis system, assembling it together. But we expect to be doing, I don't want to say dry runs because we use water. Water is the greatest decomposer on the planet. Water will decompose a rock. Water has carved canyons and mountains. Water is a very, very powerful element. I don't want to call it element because it's composed of elements. 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen atom, and that's what makes water. And it's a very, very, very effective dissolver, if you will. It will dissolve anything given time. And if you add heat, if you add anything else to it, that can make it more powerful. So flame cremation. Everybody is not a fan of flame cremation. Everyone is not a fan of burial. Everyone is not a fan of being in the wall. Everyone is not a fan. There are options when it comes to death care. What we're doing here at Joseph Brown is just offering another option for death care that is cleaner, greener, and kinder and gentler, not only to the body, but to the planet. Now, I had a colleague ask me, he said, Joey, what are you putting yourself out of business? You have crematories, you have retorts are the cremation machines. You have retorts. If you're doing the alkaline hydrolysis, aren't you putting yourself out of business? And I told him something that I heard before. I said, well, if I don't put myself out of business, someone else will. And I'd rather put myself out of business. However, flame cremation still has a place, especially as we continue to have rituals where the deceased is embalmed, dressed, and casketed. Flame cremation is the best for that. As far as alkaline hydrolysis is more of a minimalist offering that we call in the industry, and not just us in the industry, the death care consumer is saying this too. They are calling it direct cremation. Think about O.J. Simpson, cremated. Tina Turner, cremated. The artist Prince, cremated within days of his death. There is a trend towards minimalist death care where people are having that funeral at the bedside, at the hospital, at the hospice. They are saying their goodbyes then. I just had a call the other day, and the family, uh, they kept their loved one at their home, deceased in the bed, for the whole day. And they invited everyone over. So there's a move towards this minimalist death care from a maximalist death care. So if we look at death care and the history of America, during this Civil War, embalming, I heard by a black man, I can't confirm that, but a modern embalming was invented. Well, first of all, the greatest embalmers of all history were the Egyptians, but we're not going to talk about that today, right? So someone developed a way to preserve the body on the battlefield, and they were able to send the deceased home to be buried under the old oak tree. Then Lincoln died, and his body was embalmed. He was paraded around the country, and the only way they could do that was with preservation, embalming. So embalming still has its place, but what you're seeing is a growing number of death care consumers who don't want all that. And it's not just because of economic reasons. I mean, Prince, all the money in the world, right? He could have, I'm sure he had his arrangements where he was prearranged. His death care arrangements were prearranged, and he could have done anything, but he chose a minimalist service. So we are seeing a growing group of death care consumers that want minimalist death care. So enter alkaline hydrolysis. Patented in the late 1800s by immigrant Amos, I can't remember his last name. Patented in the late 1800s for the dissolution or the digestion or the dissolving of farm animals, and especially large farm animals. And he would do that, and he would spread the effluence or the essence, that's the liquid that is left over after doing it, very, very watery, brownish. This is coffee, by the way, black coffee, but it's a little lighter than this, but just about the same viscosity as you see here. And he would do that, and he would spread it on the land, and his crops would grow incredibly. So in 2000, let's speed up to 2010, the State Board of Morticians here in Maryland deemed that alkaline hydrolysis was indeed legal, and collaborated with organizations like CANA, Cremation Society of North America, NFDA, IFCCA, and they determined that cremation by chemistry, if you will, alkaline hydrolysis was a form of cremation because we are producing an ash product that can be returned to the family, just like with flame-based cremation. It's just that the ashes are a little bit different. They're a little softer, they're a little whiter, and they're finer with the alkaline hydrolysis cremation because they haven't been exposed to the high temperatures. We're going to be doing alkaline hydrolysis at about temperatures from 140 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. We know that boiling is 212, so it's not like we're boiling grandma. So remember when I was saying to you, we burn the trash and we bury the dead? So I can imagine that those same people will come back to me and say, Joey, so now you're flushing grandma down the toilet. Because the effluence that comes from the body being dissolved in an alkaline solution goes right down the drain. The proteins of the body go right down the drains to the Back River wastewater treatment facility. First of all, let me say that it is completely sterile. It contains peptides, particles of amino acids, and also it is virus, bacteria free, sterile, and the pH is adjusted so it has safe entry into the municipal wastewater system. And this is the flesh that would normally decompose. We just accelerate the decomposition with chemistry. Why are we still using? I made something to eat last night. I put it in the microwave. I didn't turn on the stove. So, why should we? Why hasn't death care evolved to the point where we can offer something a little? I'm not saying more sophisticated than fire, but something different than fire. And this is what we are offering.
Why did you add this option?
Well,
was there consumer demand?
So there's no consumer demand that I know of here in Maryland. We are introducing this, and we will create a demand for that by educating the consumer on the base. As cremation becomes more and more popular, you see more and more people wanting to install crematories at their funeral homes. The problem with that is emissions. Not that the emissions from a funeral home or crematory are horrible or worse than the emissions from a Ford F-150. It's the perception. Yes, we all share the air. So it's the perception. I mean, people talk about mercury and fillings. When's the last time you had mercury in your filling? I mean, that's not the issue. The thing is that if you buy a house for $200,000 20 years ago, and that house has doubled or tripled in its value, and then you come and try to install a 40-foot stack next to it, what happens to that property value? So when they in Annapolis, when they were talking about the air that we all share, maybe that wasn't the right approach. I think they should have approached it from the fact that maybe you are hurting investors, the community who have invested in their own homes and their real estate, that their home values are going to change because there's a 40-foot stack within 500 feet, within 1,000 feet, on the same block or across the street. That's going to be a challenge. But with alkaline hydrolysis, there's no air emission. So I talked to Pastor Carter across the street. I saw him at the gas station. I said, Pastor, I said, we're introducing alkaline hydrolysis. He said, alkaline who? And I said, yes. I said, we're introducing alkaline hydrolysis, which is a water-based cremation process. And he says, well, so that means we won't see any smoke coming out of your stack. And I said, no, Pastor. I said, we do everything we can to prevent smoke coming from the stack. Sometimes you can't prevent it. Where there's fire, where there's smoke, there's fire. Where there's fire, there's smoke. Sometimes you can't prevent it, but we do all the necessary steps to minimize it because we are in a residential community where we all share the air. And our crematory is in everyone's face. If you drive down Monroe Street between us and New Shiloh, you're going to see our stack, and you might see a puff or two. As cremation, like I said, becomes more and more popular, you will see more and more people investing in cremation. You just can't put it in every neighborhood. It's that NIMBY thing. So you'll see probably crematories in more industrial type situations where they won't have the problem with the community's perception or the community's loss of value in their homes because of emissions into the air and the perceived. People say, well, my child has asthma. The child who has asthma, regardless of how clean, even if your emissions are less than Burger King, regardless of that, if you're a parent and your child has asthma, you do not want a crematory next door. So what's going to, like I said, cremation will have to move to industrial places where it's more readily accepted or use a different form of cremation. Now, let's talk about cremation. The word itself, C-R-E-M, means to burn in Latin. I believe that the reason why cremation is become so popular is because it's called cremation. Language is so important, Donnie. You're a master of language. Why am I even saying this? You know, I just feel like we're having a private conversation here. Cremation is easy to say. It rolls off the tongue. Cremation, 3 syllables. Got nothing to do with cream. Nothing to do with cream. But it sounds like alkaline hydrolysis does not sound cute. Alkaline who? Well, you see people walking around drinking alkaline water, right? We use that same chemistry to disassemble the proteins of the body. The same, no emissions into the air that come from fire, low temperatures, gentle to the body, gentle to the environment. And what we don't expect to have the state of Maryland, the residents of the state of Maryland breaking, oh, we are offering this to the state of Maryland, by the way. Not just a funeral home typically serves its community. Joseph Brown has historically served its community, the Baltimore and the Baltimore metropolitan area. Well, this aquamation, or this alkaline hydrolysis, by the way, goes many names: alkaline hydrolysis, resomation, water cremation, fireless cremation, and then the list goes on and on. Joseph Brown is offering that to the state of Maryland. So if your funeral director on the Eastern Shore has a family that comes in and says, well, we want alkaline hydrolysis, they can say, well, I know just the person to do it. Joseph Brown.
I wanted to touch 2 things. One, what the legislature's role in it, because we only have a few minutes. And then secondly, how we as a people in Baltimore, now I don't know about other cities, but Black people go to a Black funeral director. I know in other places it's not like that, but in Baltimore, we go to a Black undertaker.
That's usually the case. I mean, there have been some exceptions.
If there's one Black Wall Street moment in all of this, Black people in Baltimore go to a Black funeral director. I don't care who you are. Now,
because nobody can do it like we can. We know how it's done. We
got that right. Especially in your most tiring and draining moment.
When that occurs
Big Mama, Big
loss
Daddy.
of a loved one.
How's the state of Maryland acting?
Well, it was alkaline hydrolysis, or water cremation, was made legal back in 2010 by the Board of Morticians in the state of Maryland. Last year in December, State's Attorney General Anthony Brown deemed alkaline hydrolysis, not just alkaline hydrolysis, but another form called organic reduction, natural organic reduction. He said that alkaline hydrolysis was generally illegal in the state of Maryland. Now, I have invested a lot of money into this at that point, and I was concerned. I was like, oh no, I'm investing in something that is generally illegal. And then I had to make the decision that I was going to move forward with it, regardless of whether it was illegal or not, because there is a consumer base. There is a death care family who will want alkaline hydrolysis, will want cremation, water cremation. And I want to be able to offer that to, like I said, I won't be serving a whole, it's not like everybody's going to be running in to get aquamated or alkaline hydrolysis, but there is a segment of the death care consumer base that is going to insist upon that. And I am here to serve them. We will still continue to have traditional or conventional cremation with flame, but as when I was talking with the pastor, every person that gets alkaline hydrolysis will be one less person that doesn't get released into the atmosphere.
How do you feel about that?
I love it. I love it. Is it crazy to say that death care can be exciting?
This is what
There
you
are,
do for a living. I know this. Our mental health as funeral care professionals is everything, because if we're not at peace, how can we share peace with others?
well said. Well said. What I want families to know is that at least for the first year or so, I will be performing all of the alkaline hydrolysis procedures. My objective is to become more expert than I think I already am and when it comes to alkaline hydrolysis. And Donnie, I want to invite you in. I want you to see the system that we're using is very, very, when you see it, you'll see how much sense it makes. And the technology has definitely improved. With alkaline hydrolysis, we don't have to use as much water. Older systems or systems that are currently available are using 200 to 400 gallons of water, can only release 100 gallons at a time into the municipal system, and we're only using approximately 24 gallons of water. Keep in mind that my body contains 10 gallons of water. So I don't need to add that much water. All I have to do is manage the chemistry. So I talked about people walking around drinking alkaline water. Alkaline water is at 9.3 pH. So a pH scale, that's acidity and alkalinity. 1 is acid. Okay, this is reverse on my iPad. But 1 is acid, 14 is alkaline. Coca-Cola ranks at about 3 on the acid scale. Alkaline hydrolysis, alkaline water that you see people walking around drinking is about 9.3 on the pH scale. We will do cremation, water cremation, at about the maximum, 14 on the pH scale. And then we will reduce the alkalinity before discharging into the municipal wastewater system with a substance called glacial acetic acid, vinegar with the water removed. Vinegar with the water removed. It's interesting. You got to come by, Donnie. This vinegar will freeze at 60 degrees Fahrenheit because the water has been removed. Okay, so we adjust the pH. The last I read, the requirement for discharge into the municipal waste system was at 12.5. So we're using very, very little of the glacial to balance out the pH before we discharge into
How is this being received nationally?
Well, I think that it's being received very positively nationally. I've looked it up, looked at several podcasts and what have you. People who want it are enthusiastic about it and they demand it. In fact, if you want alkaline hydrolysis, if you want water cremation now, and you live in Baltimore, you have to go to a state like North Carolina to get it done. And they still won't have the technology that Joseph Brown has. Joseph Brown has the latest and the greatest alkaline hydrolysis technology available. It's the kindest, it's the cleanest, it's the greenest. It is clean. We literally wash the body of that flesh that would normally go back. We wash away, we dissolve the soft tissues of the body known as protein. We're made of protein and calcium, very basic. Our flesh, our eyes, our skin, everything, our fingernails are made of protein. Keratin is a protein, fingernails, protein. We disassemble these proteins and what we are left with is calcium phosphate. Calcium phosphate is just the fancy name for skeletal remains.
Joseph Brown, we got to get out of here. We got another show coming up, but I hope we were able to break this news of this historic accomplishment for Joseph H. Brown, 4th generation funeral service here in the city of Baltimore. We thank you for joining us.
I just want to say to you, Donnie, thank you, because you are the first celebrity, the first bringer of information to the people that I have talked to about this process. And I appreciate you for inviting me on to your show. And I look forward to the day you can come and visit me and we can see how it's done. I love you, brother.
Love you back, big brother. Good morning, world.